Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the fourth video in the series where we're making Meteor Galaxy. You notice I have a haircut. Because of the circumstances of 2020, it's been put off for quite a while. Finally happened. This is more what I normally look like, so might be a surprise to you, but don't usually have as long as hair as I did before. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to add stars to the game, so let's get right into it. So the first thing I want to do is talk about why these stars are important for the gameplay. So I think they're actually just as crucial for the gameplay as they are as just a decoration. And the reason is they give you a reference point on the screen when you're flying the spaceship around. Without them, you wouldn't be able to tell which direction you're moving or how fast you're going and things. Of course, the spaceship will be pointed in the direction you're going or close to it, but you might be drifting a little bit in another direction. So I think they're very important, and I'll show you quickly what it looks like with and without the stars. So here is the original Meteor Galaxy game I wrote before I started filming the series, and I'm going to show you what it looks like if you make the stars so that they're not visible. So you can see you can't really tell what's going on. Like I'm flying around, but the only reference point that I really have in the middle of the world are the meteors, and the meteors are moving themselves. So it really takes away from the thrill of the game, like being able to fly fast through space. You don't really get that same feeling without them. And plus, like you might be going along and you just don't realize how fast you're going, and you might hit one of the meteors. So it makes having the stars is a huge part of having the game. So now back into the code editor, I'm going to show you how to write the method to put the stars onto the screen. The first thing, as usual, we're going to need to set up a few variables. So I'm going to have star variables. And the first one I'm going to have is an array to hold all the star objects. So it'll be called stars, and then assign it to an empty array. And then there's also going to be star depth, and that will be an empty array. So star depth, let's talk about that. The stars, to give them a bit more feeling of depth, you can use a technique called a Parallax Background. So make them into a Parallax Background. And what that is, if you've ever been on a road trip and you looked out the side window of the car, you may notice that the things that are farthest back appear to be moving the slowest. So the mountains are going to move the slowest, and then maybe the trees between you and the mountains will move a little bit faster, but the things that are closest to you, like the railing on the side of the road, that's going to be appearing to move the fastest. And so we can recreate this feeling of depth by moving some stars slower and some stars faster. And so star depth will hold a value for each star that will be multiplied by the speed of that star, so that we can create a depth there. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is add some constants. These will hold the values that are indicate the size of the world. Since the world is going to be bigger than the canvas on the right, and everything in the world is going to move while the ship is going to stay in the center. So we need to keep track of the size of the world and where we have scrolled to in the world. So first I'll write some constants having to do with the size. Okay, what I just wrote here are the constants for the world. So the world width and the world height will be the total amount of pixels for the width and height, so it's going to be bigger than the canvas, like I mentioned. And then to set up the world top left X and then top left Y, I do half of the world width but negative, and then for the bottom right X and bottom right Y, actually these should be positive, they're going to be just the world width and the world height divided by 2. And what this is doing is making the very center of the world x equals 0, y equals 0, and then the world will be centered on that point. All right, next I'm going to add two more variables. So variable scroll x, and that one will be equal to get width divided by 2, and then scroll y, and that will be equal to get height divided by 2. So these two variables are going to keep track of how far we've scrolled through the world, or what position we are within the world. So I set the get scroll x and scroll y to get width divided by 2 and get height divided by 2, because the center of the world is 0, 0. So when you start out, right here is the center of the world, because that's 0, 0. But the ship is at get width divided by 2, get height divided by 2, since it's in the center of the canvas. And so we should initialize scroll x and scroll y to be get width and get height divided by 2. Next, let's add the add stars method. There's a few things that we should do so to make sure that this method gets called, and that's add another case to the game manager. So this is going to be case and state dot init game, so initialize game, and then from here we're going to call an init game method that we're going to write, and then break. So now we need to add init game to one of the states, like that, and then we're going to need to add an init game function. Okay, and then the first thing we can add to this init game function is add stars. And actually I'm gonna move this function down. Since I have an intro and then play intro, I'm gonna put it after these, so I kind of have the functions in order of how they'll be used in the game. And then right here I'll put the add stars function. And so now we know it's going to be called. And then in the init game, I'll have game state equals state dot run game. And for now, we'll just add this to the state, and we'll write the method for that later. So run game will be 4. Okay, finally we can add stars. A lot of things that go before it. So the first thing that we should do is clear the array, just since we're gonna be able to play the game multiple times after hitting the run code button. We need to reset the game each time, so that's something good that we can take care of inside of here. So stars will just equal an empty array, and then we'll have the star depth that will also equal an empty array. And then we need to loop. So for variable I equals 0, I is less than, I'm going to make a new constant called number of stars, then I plus plus. So we're going to go through this loop and add a new star to the stars array and put it somewhere random and give it a random size. And I'm going to go and add constant right here, so called number of stars, and I'm going to set to 4,000 right now. So my computer is able to handle 4,000. If you're just having a bit of trouble with that, you can always make that number less, and I might make it less before I publish it if I find that it's going to be hard for a lot of computers to run. Alright, so now we need to create a new object. So I'm going to call it new star, and that's going to be a new circle. Then for the size of the circle, I'm going to use the randomizer. So you can access randomizer with uppercase randomizer, and then dot, and then you can do next int or next float. Float means you'll get a decimal number, int means it won't. I'm going to do next float. And you're going to want to do the next float when you want more granularity, but if you're covering a large distance, then next int is usually fine. Like say where to put it on the screen. And the size of the star is going to be between 1.5 and 4. Next, I need to set the position. So I'm going to say new star dot set position. And then inside of here, since I'm going to have a lot of parameters, I'm going to put each parameter on its own line. So we're going to use randomizer again, and then dot next int, because like I said, it doesn't need to be a decimal number since we can go, we have a large distance to cover, and so we don't need the finest granularity there. And that will be the world top left X, and then we're going to do between the world bottom right X. So it can go anywhere between the top left X and the bottom right X, and the bottom right X is going to be the same as the top left X, but so that's why I don't have two variables for that. And then randomizer dot next int, and this will look similar to the X position. Okay. Oh, right here, this should be a comma since it's these are our parameters. So now we've set the position of the star to some random place that's within the world. The next thing we need to do is set the color. So new star dot set color, and this will be color dot yellow. You can use other colors if you'd like. You could do a create color from RGB and maybe have a range of colors that you'd like to use, or do randomizer if you want to look more like confetti, whatever you like, have some fun. Next, we need to add the star to the screen. So add the new star, and then we need to add the star to the array, as well as give it a depth in the depth array. So by putting it in the array, that's putting the reference inside of the array, and so it means that we can group all the stars together and easily access them later. So we're going to call stars for the stars array dot push new star, and then we're going to do star depth dot push, and then we need to do another random number. So this is going to be randomizer dot next float, and this has to be a float because we need the decimal number, because the way the star depth is going to work is 1 means that it moves as the same speed as like the ship would be moving, except for the ship doesn't move. It's all the other objects move around the ship to make the ship appear that's moving since it's scrolling. But anyways, 1 is going to be it's moving the same speed as the ship, and then it's going to be a decimal number to slow it down. So we're just going to be able to directly multiply the ship speed by the star depth, which could be, I'm going to do as low as 0.01 to make it go slower. So the next float will be between 1 and then 0.01, and then that's all we need to do to add the stars. So right there, next we need to move the stars, but let's take a look at when we play Meteor Galaxy. Oh, that's right. Inside of the knit game, we should remove everything from the screen. Another thing I need to show you is right now the button just says button pressed from the last video. Now we need to actually make it do something. So since we added another state for knit game, and this is the play button, the first thing to play the game is to initialize the game. So we're gonna say game state dot, and then, or game state equals state dot init game. And then the other thing that we need to do, if you remember from the last video, we wrote a function that was to clear all of the clickable buttons, so or clickable objects. So right here, we're going to grab that and say clear clickable objects, because we know when we click this button, we're going to be transitioning from the menu to the game. And so we will no longer have buttons to click. So, and also remember, this is a function, an anonymous function. So these are just two methods that we're putting in to call later. And I've just put them in one single line just to make it a little bit simpler. And so next we can run this and then hit play. And oh, looks like I just needed an underscore there, so a little typo. Looks like I made the same mistake there. Okay, after fixing the underscores, you can see that we now have stars on the screen, but we can't really tell the depth because they're not moving. And I also made size independent of depth, meaning like there's not an effect on size and depth. And that's just because you might have larger stars that are farther and the smaller stars are closer, or the other way around. So I just went ahead and made those two properties different, independent of each other. Oh, the next thing I'm going to do is modify the move ship method that we wrote before. So right here, we have this move X and move Y, and we change those by move speed. I'm going to go ahead and add to this function so that we can move the stars around. So if you remember, we made the scroll X and scroll Y variables. So scroll X, we're going to add the move X to that. And then scroll Y, we're going to add the move Y to that. All right, so that will move our position around on the screen. The other thing I'm going to do is add a second set of variables called scroll X, or last scroll X. And then that will just equal scroll X on initialization. And then, let's see, we're going to do last scroll Y. And that will equal scroll Y. So the reason I added the last scroll X and the last scroll Y is that we can know how far we've moved. So move the ship, since scroll X holds where we have scrolled to in the world, since the world scrolls around the spaceship. It holds the position, but you don't know how far you've gone unless you have the last position. So, you know, how far you've gone is the last minus the current. So that difference will give us how far we've traveled, and so we'll know how far to move each star. So let's go down and write the next method, and that will be move stars. So we'll put that after move ship. Function move stars. Okay, next we're going to do another for loop, and this will be for the length of the star variable. So for variable I equals 0, I is less than stars dot length I plus plus. So we're going to iterate through the stars array, and for each star we're going to need to move it. So I'm going to say the variable move X, and we'll calculate here the amount that we have moved the world through scroll X and last scroll X. So that'll be the current position, scroll X, minus the last position, last scroll X. And then variable move Y will equal scroll Y minus last scroll Y. All right. The next thing we need to do is access the depth. So I'm going to say variable depth equals its star depth is our array, and then we're going to get at the same index of the star, so that'll be at I. And then we're going to access the star, so this will be stars at I. And then we're going to call a method on this. That's going to be the move method. So move. And then we're going to do move X and move Y. And I'm going to actually go ahead and put the logic up here for instead of putting it in the move function. So what I need to do is wrap these in some parentheses and then multiply them by the depth. So what we're getting is calculating how far we've moved, and we move by scrolling in the world, so that's why they're called scroll X and scroll Y. So current minus last will be the amount we moved, then multiply by the depth, so that will mean that make it move less depending on how far back it is, and then we're going to move that star by that amount. Before we test this method, we have to add one more thing to the game manager, and that will be the run game. So in the run game, we're going to be checking the keyboard input and then moving the stars for now. So I'll add another case, and this will be state.run game, and then add the break. And then inside here, we're just going to call a run game method. So let's add that. All right, inside the run game, we're going to move the ship. There's not really a ship to move, but right now we're just using it to move around in the world. There will be one later. The next thing we need to do is move the stars. So since we're moving we're going to need to document the last scroll Y and move to get a new current scroll Y. We should have the move stars after the move ship so that it can track how the ship is moving. And there's one more thing I need to do. And at the top of move ship, I need to say last scroll X equals scroll X. And then last scroll Y equals scroll Y. So since right here we're just about to update what the scroll X and scroll Y will be, we can then assign them the old value. Since this is being run again and hasn't done the new value for that frame, we want to assign it to the last scroll X and last scroll Y at the very top, so because otherwise if you do it after, it'll just be holding the same as the current scroll value. So let's go ahead and run that and take a look and see how it's looking. Oh, I increased the move speed right here to 20 so that they'll move a bit faster and be easier to spot the movement. So you can see it should be inverted right now just because of the way we wrote that move ship function earlier. Because right now we're moving the world around the ship instead of moving the ship around the world. And so when you're moving the world around the ship, you need to, like, if you want to make the ship look like it's moving to the right, you need to make the world move to the left. So that's why it's inverted. But you can still see you can move around the world, and the stars, they do they're parallax. So some of them are moving slower to appear like they're in the background. And it looks really cool. Like, this is a pretty neat effect, and it doesn't require too much code, which is nice, but I think it adds a lot to the game having it be parallax. So I'd say having it parallax, that would be optional, but having the stars themselves, that I'd say is a pretty essential part to the game, because otherwise you couldn't tell how or where you're moving and your speed and things. Alright, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. For the next one, you won't want to miss it because we're going to make the ship move around on the screen, so that'll be really cool. I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.